"I'm sorry, but I've found someone new." Thomas's voice sliced through the elegant ballroom like a blade tearing silk. The laughter stopped. The jazz-faded glasses froze mid-air. Evelyn stood motionless in the middle of her daughter's engagement party, her 30-year marriage shattering in a single sentence. The air turned cold and still. Claire, her daughter, went pale beside her fiancé, Ethan, who held her trembling hand. Near Thomas stood Alana, his young assistant dressed in a fiery red gown, lips curved in a quiet, satisfied smile, eyes gleaming with pride. Evelyn felt her heart explode, but her face stayed calm, her lips forming a faint, graceful smile. She set her glass down, gently reached into her purse, and pulled out a white envelope. "Thank you for your honesty," she said softly, her voice low but steady. Thomas blinked, caught off guard. "What's this?" he asked. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Something you should read after the party." Then she turned to her daughter, her tone tender yet firm. "Today is still your day, Claire. Don't let anyone take that from you." She kissed her daughter's cheek, smiled once more, and turned away. The sharp echo of her heels on the marble floor filled the silence, steady, cold, and proud. The doors closed behind her as she stepped into the golden-lit hallway that seemed to swallow her figure whole. Evelyn stopped halfway, drew a deep breath, and steadied herself. Pain spread through her chest like frost, but no tears came. Memories crashed in late nights waiting for Thomas, the lavish restaurant bills, the repeated excuses of urgent projects. Now every lie stood in the open. She wondered how long she had ignored the truth. Inside, Thomas forced a laugh, but every eye on him had changed. Alana leaned closer, whispering, "I told you not to do this here." Thomas gave a strained smile. "I couldn't keep pretending." But deep down, unease tightened in his chest. Evelyn never acted without reason. That envelope chilled him. Outside, rain began to fall. Evelyn wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, walked across the glistening parking lot, and slipped into her car. The wet streets reflected the streetlights like molten gold. In the rearview mirror, she saw her own face, a woman in her 50s with sharp, determined eyes. Gone was the fragile wife who once begged for love. In her place sat someone reborn through betrayal. For 6 months, Evelyn had quietly gathered evidence, bank records, photographs, messages. When money started disappearing from their joint account, she hadn't asked questions. She investigated, and she found Alana's name on everything. After decades in banking, Evelyn knew exactly how to follow the money. She traced Thomas's hidden accounts, the lavish spending, the secret apartment he'd rented. But her strongest weapon wasn't the proof, it was the faithfulness clause Thomas had once made her sign to protect his fortune. He'd said it was a formality just in case. Now it would destroy him. She opened her phone, reading a new message from her lawyer, Rosa Jenkins Documents filed. "Temporary asset freeze takes effect Monday morning." Evelyn smiled faintly. Thomas believed he was leaving on his own terms, not knowing every step he took was already part of her plan. The rain poured harder, streaking across her windshield like silver knives. "It's over," she whispered, "but it's also a beginning." Her voice carried the quiet power of an oath. Once she had given up her dream of opening a bakery by the sea, choosing instead to live as the dutiful wife in a house filled with silence. Those years were gone. Inside the ballroom, whispers rose like wind through glass. He left his wife during his daughter's engagement. How cruel. Thomas heard it all. His grip tightened on his glass red wine, spilling down his sleeve like blood. Alana stepped back, her confidence cracking. "She won't let this go," Thomas muttered. But even he didn't realize he'd already stepped onto the blade Evelyn had been sharpening for half a year. Her car rolled through the quiet square. Rain streamed down the bronze statue of a woman, holding roses running over her face like tears. Evelyn looked up, her heart steady, her mind clear. There was nothing left to lose and nothing left to fear. Under the storm's cold rhythm, a betrayed woman was reborn, strong, calm, and dangerously alive. Morning settled over Savannah in a pale gray mist after the night rain. Evelyn sat by the window of her seaside house, watching the waves rise and fall like the slow, steady breath of the ocean. The dim light glimmered on her cup of coffee, the room so quiet she could hear the soft ticking of the clock. On the table, their old wedding photograph leaned to one side. Its glass cracked the smiles frozen in time, two people who no longer existed. Evelyn touched her younger face in the picture, once full of faith, now a reminder of the naive woman who had given everything to a man who betrayed her. She opened her laptop. On the screen, folders titled Evidence appeared. For 6 months, Evelyn had gathered every detail: bank statements, restaurant receipts, photos of text messages. At first, she had hoped it was all a misunderstanding, but the name Alana appeared too often on meeting notes, dinner invitations, overlapping trips. That was when she stopped pretending. That afternoon, she drove to see Rosa Jenkins, her closest friend, a widowed divorce lawyer, sharp and compassionate. When Evelyn finished speaking, Rosa was silent, then asked, "Are you sure you want to go this far?" Evelyn nodded. "I've spent half my life living for others. The rest belongs to me." From that day, they became allies. Evelyn traced the flow of money. Rosa handled the legal work, the divorce papers, the asset freeze order. By evening, the sea breeze carried the scent of salt through the garden, where the red roses bloomed after rain, their color too vivid to bear. She remembered when Alana had come to visit, admiring the garden, asking for tips, holding her hand like a friend. Evelyn had smiled then, unaware that kindness hid betrayal. Now she realized every gesture had been a delicate cut. She plucked a single rose, placed it in a vase, and whispered, "Roses still bloom, even if the gardener has changed." Her phone chimed. A message from Claire, "Mom, can I come over?" Evelyn's chest tightened. She feared this talk, but silence could not last. "I'll be home this afternoon," she replied. Claire arrived in a damp coat hair tangled from rain eyes, red from tears. "Why didn't you tell me? Why let him humiliate you like that?" Evelyn poured tea, her tone calm. "Because I wanted you to have one peaceful day, even if it lasted only a few hours." Claire's voice trembled. "He shamed you in front of everyone." Evelyn smiled faintly. "No, darling. He shamed himself." The words hung in the air like cold steel. Claire wept, and Evelyn drew her into an embrace. For the first time in years, she felt her arms hold not weakness, but the strength of a lifetime endured in silence. After Claire left, the rain returned, soft and steady. Evelyn cleared the tea set, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope holding a copy of her marriage contract. The paper had yellowed, the ink faded, but the clause remained sharp and clear. The faithfulness clause stating that if either partner betrayed the other, all shared assets would belong to the faithful one. Thomas had once called it just precaution. Now it would be his downfall. Evelyn traced the paper's edge and smiled. Night deepened. The sound of rain merged with the roar of waves beyond the window. She opened her laptop and wrote to Rosa, all documents ready. Freeze order files Monday. Secondary account at Atlantic First Bank verified. She pressed send, then leaned back, a strange peace filling her chest. Near midnight, Evelyn stepped onto the balcony. The air smelled of salt, the sea dark and endless. Far away, the lighthouse turned slowly, its beams sweeping across the water like a watchful eye. She whispered, "Tomorrow justice begins." In that moment, she no longer felt fragile. She was the one holding the keys, the author of her own story. Across town in a hotel suite, Thomas sat by the window, his glass of wine untouched. He didn't know the freeze order was already signed, that the seaside house now belonged to Evelyn. He only felt a creeping unease the first chill of the consequences he'd set in motion. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the echo of change. Evelyn turned off the lights and closed the window. A quiet smile curved her lips. Life could take away love, but it could never take the dignity of a woman who chooses to rise. And when dawn came, she would begin again, strong, free, and beholden to no one. Monday morning arrived with the sky over Savannah, glowing a soft golden hue, as if freshly polished after the rain. Evelyn woke early, brewed a cup of black tea, and opened the window to let the sea breeze rush in. The air was salty and cool, filling the quiet house with life. On the table, a stack of neatly arranged folders weighted the papers carefully organized over the past few months. Today, the court's freeze order would take effect. 6 months of endurance and silence were finally rewarded with a calm, certain morning. The doorbell rang. Rosa stood at the entrance in a dark coat, holding a thick set of documents. "It's done," she said. "Atlantic First Bank received the court order at 8 o'clock. Evelyn nodded. "Thank you. Now it's his turn to taste justice." The two women sat by the window. Sunlight brushed across Evelyn's face, highlighting a serenity that felt almost regal. "What will you do next?" Rosa asked. "Open a bakery," Evelyn replied. "That dream never died. It's time to live for myself." Rosa smiled, a proud beginning. While they spoke, Thomas sat in his downtown office when his phone rang. The banker's voice was firm and emotionless. "Sir, your joint account has been temporarily frozen by court order." Thomas froze. "That's impossible. There must be a mistake." "I'm sorry, sir. We can't intervene." The phone slipped from his hand, coffee spilling across the desk. He grabbed his cell and called Alana, his voice hoarse. "What did you tell her?" Alana stammered. "Nothing, I swear. Maybe she knew long ago." Thomas said nothing, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as dread rose through him like smoke. By noon, he drove straight to the seaside house. Evelyn opened the door, composed and calm. "You came sooner than I expected." Thomas stepped inside, his voice sharp. "What did you do with my money?" Evelyn replied evenly, "I only protected what's mine." He snapped, "You want to humiliate me." "No," she said. "I just want you to face what you've done." She placed a folder before him. Statements, photos, messages. "Do you remember the clause you made me sign, the one about faithfulness?" Thomas faltered, then forced a smirk. "That's expired." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. Section 15, line 3, it remains valid for the entire duration of the marriage. You didn't read it carefully as usual. Thomas's face went pale and he stepped back. Outside waves struck the glass wall with a sound like a whip. Evelyn's voice was steady. "You always thought you held all the power, but you forgot I was the one who managed our finances." He tried to regain control. "You'll regret this." "No," she answered. "But you will learn what honesty costs." When Thomas left, Evelyn closed the door. The wind carried the scent of salt through the house, cool and clean. She sank into a chair, feeling the weight of months lift from her shoulders. 6 months of fear and pretense had ended. Justice was finally in motion. That afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Claire. Her voice trembled. "Mom, I heard Dad lost control at work. Everyone knows." Evelyn sighed. "Then maybe he's just paying for what he's done." There was silence, then Claire whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Evelyn smiled softly. "Thank you, sweetheart. I just stood up when it was time." As the sun dipped low, Rosa returned carrying a bottle of red wine. They sat on the porch facing the sea, glowing orange beneath the fading light. Rosa raised her glass. To resilience. Evelyn lifted hers. To freedom. The sound of the clinking glasses mingled with the rhythm of the waves, a quiet promise carried by the wind. Evelyn inhaled deeply, the salty air cool against her skin, both sharp and sweet. In a hotel across town, Thomas sat in the dark, the bottle half empty beside him. His phone rang again and again, partners, employees, then finally Alana. Her message was brief. "I need time. I don't want to be part of this." Thomas hurled the phone to the floor. He understood now that the empire he had built over 3 decades was crumbling brick by brick, and the person who had pushed it down was the same gentle wife he once believed harmless. Night fell. Evelyn turned off the lights and stepped onto the porch. The sea stretched before her, dark and endless, the waves crashing in steady rhythm. She stood still, letting the wind whip through her hair, feeling the silence of triumph settle around her, a victory that needed no applause. For the first time in months, she would sleep peacefully, knowing life had finally returned, what mattered most, the right to decide her own fate, and the quiet, unwavering trust she now had in herself. The next morning, the ocean wind swept through the coast, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Evelyn woke later than usual, but for the first time in months, she felt no pressure in her chest. Sunlight poured through the curtains, spreading across the desk, where stacks of documents had finally been cleared away. The house was silent, peaceful in a way she had almost forgotten. Only the distant cry of seagulls and the warm smell of toasted bread filled the air. She made a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The sea glimmered under silver light. Evelyn sat still, watching the waves roll in and out, her mind calm and clear. She remembered being 28 the first time she and Thomas came to this house. He had promised it would be where they grew old together. That promise had vanished like foam on the tide. Yet instead of pain, she felt lightness. Perhaps loss was never as frightening as living trapped inside deceit. The sound of a car drifted from beyond the gate. It was Mr. Parker, the quiet neighbor who had lived alone for years. He brought a basket of lemons. "I heard Thomas left," he said gently. "Are you all right?" Evelyn smiled. "Better than I've ever been." Parker nodded. "You're stronger than you look," she replied. "I'm just tired of being afraid." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment neither spoke. When he left, the faint scent of lemons lingered. That afternoon Rosa called. "It's everywhere," she said. "The press found out about Thomas. One of his employees leaked details about his secret account. It's all over the business pages." Evelyn answered quietly, "Good. The truth always finds its way to the surface." She went upstairs and opened her closet. In the far corner hung the blue dress Thomas had once loved, neatly pressed, its familiar scent long gone. Evelyn took it down, folded it carefully, and placed it in a box. She would donate it. Every object in the house carried a memory, and she was ready to start fresh. That evening, Claire arrived with a small bouquet. "Mom, Dad keeps calling," she said. "He wants to talk to you." Evelyn poured tea, her voice calm. "I know, but it's not time yet." Claire looked around the house, her eyes soft. "It feels different here. Quiet but peaceful." Evelyn smiled. When you stop being afraid of loneliness, silence becomes your best friend. They ate dinner together, the sound of cutlery soft and steady. "Do you regret it?" Claire asked. Evelyn paused, thinking. "No, I only regret waiting so long to realize I could live on my own." Tears filled Claire's eyes. "You always lived for everyone else. Now it's your turn." Evelyn touched her hand gently. "Remember this, darling. Never let anyone make you believe your worth depends on them." When Claire left, rain began to fall. Evelyn stood by the window, watching drops slide down the glass. Under the light, the rain looked like silver threads stitching back the torn pieces of her heart. She remembered the last time Thomas held her hand and said he loved her. That image had lost all power. What filled her now was peace, the quiet rhythm of freedom flowing through her veins. Later, she opened her laptop and saw the news headline, "Businessman Thomas Grant under financial investigation." Below the photo were hundreds of comments, some sympathetic, most condemning. Evelyn read them without satisfaction or anger. Everything happening was the natural result of greed and betrayal. Near midnight, she stepped outside again. The sea stretched endlessly before her, dark and deep, the waves steady as breath. She thought of her mother's old notebook, where one line was written in faded ink. "When you cut away what is decayed, what remains can finally live." Only now did she understand. A quiet strength pulsed inside her, steady and alive. In the city, Thomas sat in a rented apartment, lights flickering the room in disarray. His phone rang again and again, partners, colleagues, and finally Alana. Her message was short. "I need time. I can't be part of this." Thomas stared at it, then hurled the phone to the floor. He knew the empire he had built for decades was collapsing piece by piece, and the one who brought it down was the wife he had once dismissed as harmless. Night deepened. Evelyn turned off the lights, slipped into bed, and listened to the rhythm of the sea. She smiled not because she had won, but because she had finally learned how to stand alone without fear. Tomorrow, when dawn returned, she would begin again from zero, with no husband, no deceit, no chains. Only herself. And that was enough to write a new story. Late in the afternoon, the sky over Savannah was heavy with clouds, and the sea wind carried the sharp scent of salt. Evelyn had just returned from the supermarket when she saw a familiar car stop at the gate. Thomas. He stood in the yard, his shirt clinging to his back, his face drawn with anger and exhaustion. Evelyn didn't look surprised. She had been waiting for this moment. "We need to talk," Thomas said hoarsely. Evelyn's tone was cold. "Everything that needed to be said, I've already said." "You're destroying my life," he shouted. "No, Thomas," she replied. "I just stopped letting you destroy mine." Thomas stormed into the house, rain dripping from his clothes onto the floor. "You can't take everything from me. I built that company with my own hands." Evelyn crossed her arms. "And I kept it alive for 30 years while you were busy buying gifts for someone else. Alana isn't who you think she is," he snapped. "Really?" Evelyn said calmly. "Would you like to hear the recording?" Thomas froze his lips, trembling. She opened a drawer and placed a folder in front of him. "Here are the statements, the freeze order, and pictures of Alana leaving your apartment. She walked out yesterday." He stared at the papers, his voice breaking. "She told me she'd stay with me." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Maybe you should check your wallet before asking about love." He slammed his hand on the table. "I'll sue. I'll take everything back." "You can try," she said evenly. "But you'll need money for a lawyer, and that's not so easy anymore." Thomas stepped back, his anger fading into despair. "Evelyn, do you really want to ruin me?" She spoke slowly, her voice steady. "No. I just want you to see the consequences of your choices. Justice isn't revenge." The door closed behind him, and the sound of his engine faded into the rain. Evelyn stood at the window, watching the storm. There was no anger left, only release. 6 months of endurance had led to this moment of freedom. That night, Rosie arrived. Evelyn told her about the confrontation, and Rosa listened, her sharp eyes reflecting the firelight. "He's desperate," Rosa warned. "You need to be careful." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid. Those who've lost everything have nothing left to fear." Rosa shook her head. "You still have a future. Don't trade it for anger." They sat beside the fireplace, the flames dancing across the walls. Evelyn whispered, "It's strange, isn't it? You have to be betrayed before you learn how to love yourself." Rosa nodded. "Pain wakes us up. But once you wake, You've already won. The next morning, Evelyn received a message from the bank, freeze order extended. She set the phone down and stepped into the garden. The wind brushed through her silver hair. The roses, still wet from the rain, glowed crimson. She reached out, touching a petal, a drop of cold water sliding across her finger. Life, she thought, was like a rose. It still carried beauty even after being cut. A car stopped at the gate again. Claire entered, her face tense. "Mom-Dad says you're being cruel." Evelyn's voice was calm. "When people can't control you anymore, they call you cruel." Claire hesitated, then began to cry. "I'm sorry, Mom. I used to think you were too hard." Evelyn embraced her, stroking her hair. "It's all right. Just remember one thing: never let anyone decide your worth for you." They moved into the kitchen, where Evelyn made Claire's favorite soup. The sound of the knife and the gentle bubbling of broth filled the air, pushing away the heaviness. Claire smiled through her tears. "This house feels warmer now." Evelyn replied softly, "Because it's warmed by the truth." When Claire left, the rain had stopped. The sunset painted the sky gold, and Evelyn stood on the porch, listening to the rhythm of the waves. She whispered, "The betrayer is gone, but faith remains." In the city, Thomas sat alone in his rented apartment. On the screen, the news headline read, "Businessman Thomas Grant, under financial investigation." He hurled his phone across the room and dropped his head into his hands. Outside the window, rain began to fall again, cold and relentless. Back at the seaside house, Evelyn lit a single candle. The warm light flickered softly against the pale walls. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The faint scent of lemons from Parker's basket lingered in the air. Evelyn smiled, not from victory, but from peace. For the first time in years, she felt truly free, no longer trapped by fear or pretense. She had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her truth, and in that quiet light, freedom itself felt like the sweetest revenge. Dawn spread across the Savannah coast, sunlight thin as golden silk. Evelyn woke early, opened the windows, and let the sea breeze sweep in with its soft, salty scent. The house glowed in the new day's light, so still she could hear the ticking of the clock. Last night she had slept peacefully for the first time in months. In her dream, she walked along an empty beach, free from fear or anger, light as if reborn. On the dining table lay the morning newspaper. The headline read, "Businessman Thomas Grant, under financial fraud investigation." Evelyn glanced once, then folded it away. The truth no longer needed her voice. She brewed coffee, its aroma filling the quiet kitchen. Outside, seagulls cried above the waves. The phone rang. Rosa's voice came through bright and warm. "Good news, the court approved your divorce. The hearing is next week." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you. It's finally time." Rosa replied, "Don't call it an ending. For you, it's a beginning." Evelyn looked toward the calm sea, her heart steady as the tide. By noon, she drove downtown. The familiar streets shimmered under the sun oak trees, swaying gently in the wind. She stopped at a small corner shop in the old district. A crooked for-lease sign hung on the dusty glass. Inside, the faint scent of sugar and flour lingered. She stood silently before stepping in. This was once a bakery owned by a friend, the place where her forgotten dream began. The property manager greeted her, offering his hand. "Would you like a long-term lease?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, I'm reopening it alone." He smiled. "This city needs people like you." She signed the contract, immediately her hand firm and sure. That afternoon, Evelyn returned home with the document. She removed every photo that showed Thomas, placed them in a box, sealed it, and pushed it into the closet. As the lid closed, so did the door to her past. The wind outside grew strong, yet inside she felt a deep peace. That evening, Rosa arrived with a bottle of white wine. They sat on the porch, listening to the rhythmic waves and the soft rustle of curtains. "I heard you rented a bakery," Rosa said. Evelyn nodded. "It's called Sea Breeze Bakery. I want to start again where the smell of flour meets the scent of the sea." Rosa lifted her glass. "To freedom." Evelyn smiled. "To courage." The wine glowed golden between them like a small flame against the dark. When Rosa left the house shimmered under candlelight. Evelyn opened her notebook and began to write expenses, recipes, opening date. Each line brought her back to life. She was no longer the woman who waited for permission. She was her own beginning. A message appeared on her phone. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I've lost everything. You win." She read it, set the phone down, and said nothing. No joy, no pity, just the quiet closure she had waited for. Thomas had chosen his path, and now he would walk it alone. Outside, the crescent moon hung above the sea. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, the breeze lifting her hair. Moonlight shimmered on the waves. She remembered her mother's words. "A strong woman never waits to be saved. She learns to save herself." Evelyn whispered, "Mother, I've done it." The next morning, she wore a pale blue dress, tied her hair neatly, and drove to her new bakery. She hung a fresh sign on the door, "Sea Breeze Bakery," opening soon. The sunlight warmed her face as the wind brushed past her. Evelyn looked at the sign fluttering lightly and felt an unfamiliar peace. After all these years, she was finally living her own life, simple, free, and true as the morning air. In the city center, Thomas stepped out of his office building surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed like lightning, the end of an empire caught in the storm. He lowered his head, stripped of pride and certainty. Evelyn had not only reclaimed justice, but had taught him the cruelest lesson of all the price of truth learned too late. That evening, Evelyn sat on a stone bench by the sea, her notebook open on her lap. She wrote slowly, "Freedom isn't about winning over others, it's about finding yourself again." She closed the book, smiling. The wind carried the scent of salt and promise, whispering of a new beginning, soft, steady, and unbreakable. That morning, the sky over Savannah was a rare, clear blue. Evelyn stood in front of her new bakery, a small ring of keys cold in her hand. The sign "Sea Breeze Bakery" shimmered under the sunlight. Inside, the wide room smelled of new paint and freshly baked cookies. The oven clicked softly, and a golden batch rose perfectly round, filling the air with butter, sugar, and vanilla. Evelyn smiled. The dream she thought had died was alive again, warm and real. The peaceful morning lasted until Claire walked in, holding a newspaper. "Mom, Dad just went on television," she said, her voice shaking. "He said you ruined his reputation." Evelyn set the tray down calmly. "He's just trying to save what's left of it, darling." Claire frowned. "He also said you tricked him to take his money." Evelyn sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "The truth doesn't need defending, sweetheart. It knows how to shine on its own." They sat at a small table near the window. Claire held her cup of tea tightly. "I'm afraid people will speak badly about you." Evelyn smiled gently. "People always talk, but they forget. You must live without forgetting who you are." Tears filled Claire's eyes as Evelyn reached over, holding her daughter's hand. In the sweet scent of cookies, their pain began to fade. Around noon, Rosa arrived with a folder. "The court hearing is Tuesday," she said. "Thomas hired a new lawyer." Evelyn shrugged. "Good. The sooner it's done, the better." Rosa gave a half smile. "You're the calmest client I've ever seen before a trial." Evelyn answered softly, "Calm is what remains when tears are gone." Evening settled and customers started to come in. An elderly couple stopped, drawn by the smell, buying 2 cookies. A young student peeked through the glass at the sign that read, "Homemade with love." Evelyn greeted them warmly, her smile sincere. Each face felt like a quiet welcome back to life. When night came, she closed the bakery and counted her first day's earnings. It wasn't much, but enough to make her feel whole again. Outside, the breeze carried the scent of salt and vanilla. She took a photo of the bakery sign glowing in the window and sent it to Rosa with the caption, "Day 1 of Freedom." Across town, Thomas sat alone in his rented apartment, a half-empty bottle beside him. The dim light reflected his tired, hollow face. He scrolled through social media and saw the photo of Evelyn's bakery. Beneath it, hundreds of comments read, "She deserves happiness. Her story is inspiring." Thomas dropped his phone and buried his head in his hands. For the first time, he realized the woman he had tried to destroy was now admired by everyone. That night, a small storm swept through the coast. Thunder cracked, rain fell in sheets. Evelyn stood inside her shop, watching the raindrops race down the glass. She wasn't afraid. The storm only made the air feel cleaner. When the wind howled, she drew the curtains and lit a candle on the counter. The golden glow flickered over her face, tired but calm. Near midnight, the doorbell rang. It was Parker, her neighbor, carrying an umbrella and a basket of lemons. "I saw your light," he said. "Thought you forgot to lock up." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you. I'm just waiting for the storm to pass." Parker looked around the shop. "This place feels warmer than home." Evelyn replied, "Maybe because there's no lies here." They laughed, their voices blending with the sound of rain. The next morning, the skies cleared. The air after the storm was crisp and fresh. Evelyn opened the bakery doors wide. Sunlight poured in, glinting on the polished counters. She placed Parker's lemons on the shelf and began mixing dough for a new batch. The scent of lemon and butter filled the air. As the oven hummed, Evelyn whispered, "This is what real life feels like." At the same time, Thomas received an envelope from the court, a formal summons. He crushed it in his hand, but the fight had drained from him. Everything was collapsing faster than he imagined. Friends turned away, employees quit, and in the mirror he saw not the man he once was, but the shadow of his own downfall. That afternoon, Evelyn stood at the bakery door gazing out at the sea. The wind carried the smell of warm pastries through the street. Passers-by stopped to smile, breathing it in. Evelyn's heart filled with quiet warmth. Life, she thought, still had sweetness as long as you were brave enough to start baking it again. Tuesday morning, the sun rose over Savannah in a blaze of red. Along the main avenue, cars streamed like veins of light, the city breathing into a new day. But for Evelyn, it was no ordinary morning. It was the day of her first court hearing against Thomas. She woke early, brewed ginger tea, ate a slice of lemon cookie, and stood before the mirror adjusting her cream-colored coat. The reflection showed a calm woman, eyes bright and proud, no longer the gentle Evelyn she once was. Rosa arrived carrying a thick folder. "Are you ready?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "I don't need to win. I just need justice." They stepped into the car, the morning wind tangling their hair. On the way, Evelyn looked out at the oak trees lining the road, sunlight piercing through their leaves. She thought to herself, no matter the outcome, she had already won the victory over her own fear. The Savannah courthouse stood solemnly in the city's center, its gray stone walls imposing. Inside, the long hallway smelled faintly of paper and old wood. When Evelyn entered the courtroom, Thomas was already seated. He looked thinner, his face hollow, but he still tried to appear composed. Beside him sat a young lawyer, visibly uneasy. As Evelyn passed, Thomas leaned slightly toward her. "We can settle this privately, Evelyn," he murmured. She stopped. "We've been settling privately for 30 years, Thomas." Today it's time to speak before the truth. The hearing began. The judge, an elderly woman with neatly tied silver hair, flipped through the documents, her voice firm and steady. According to the signed terms, the faithfulness clause remains valid throughout the marriage. Thomas stiffened, whispering hurriedly to his lawyer. Evelyn remained composed, her hands loosely clasped. The judge continued. Evidence shows that Mr. Thomas Grant violated this clause through financial transactions and personal correspondence. The court hereby maintains the asset freeze and temporarily grants ownership of the seaside property to Mrs. Evelyn Grant until division is finalized. The gavel struck sharply. Thomas stood up abruptly. Your Honor, this is unfair. The judge looked up. Betrayal is the injustice, not its consequence. The courtroom fell silent. Evelyn met his gaze, her expression calm, touched with sadness. His protests faded like wind through empty halls. When the session ended, reporters waited outside. Rosa shielded Evelyn from the cameras. One journalist called out Mrs. Grant. Do you have a message for your ex-husband? Evelyn smiled. There's nothing left to say. I only hope we each learn our own lesson. Then she walked past the flashing lights without looking back. Later, the two women had lunch at a small riverside cafe. Rosa raised her glass. You did it. Evelyn smiled faintly. I didn't do it to win, Rosa. I did it to be free. Rosa nodded softly. Freedom is the finest victory. That afternoon, Evelyn returned to her bakery. The air was rich with flour, sugar, and lemon. She changed into her apron and began kneading dough. Customers stopped by offering flowers and congratulations. Claire called on video, her face glowing. Mom, you're in the papers. Everyone's calling you brave. Evelyn laughed gently, stirring the batter. I just chose to live honestly, sweetheart. Meanwhile, in his rented apartment, Thomas sat in silence. His young lawyer spoke timidly. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't appeal without new evidence. Thomas waved him off. The setting sun spilled red light through the window, painting his worn face. His phone rang. It was Alana. He ignored it. Moments later, a message appeared. I'm not coming back. I need someone who keeps their promises. Thomas hurled the phone at the wall. The glass shattered, scattering shards that caught the dying sunlight. That evening, Evelyn walked along the shore. The sun dipped low, turning the sea to molten bronze. She slipped off her shoes, letting her bare feet sink into the cool, wet sand. Each wave washed over her toes, carrying away fragments of the past. She looked out to where the horizon met the water and whispered, It's over. Yet her voice carried the weight of a beginning. Parker strolled by and stopped. Heard you won the case. Evelyn smiled. No one wins, Parker. There are only those who choose to live truthfully. He chuckled. I bet your cakes will be sweeter now. Evelyn laughed. I hope so. They stood side by side listening to the sea and the wind threading through their hair, gentle as a blessing. That night back home, Evelyn wrote in her journal, Justice does not come to punish, but to illuminate. When we find the courage to step out of the dark, the light will find us. She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the room rest in the scent of baked bread and the peace of a new beginning. The next morning, Savannah glowed softly beneath a pale gold sky. A cool sea breeze drifted through the open doors of Sea Breeze Bakery, carrying the mingled scents of butter, flour, and salt. Inside, Evelyn moved calmly, her hands working the dough in steady rhythm. The smell of lemon and sugar filled the kitchen sunlight, pouring through the window, warm on her shoulders. Everything was quiet, balanced, peaceful. No fear, no noise, only calm. The bakery opened early. Mr. Parker arrived, first setting a basket of bright lemons on the counter. Your cookies sold out again, he said with a grin. Everyone's talking about them. Evelyn smiled. I just bake with my heart. Maybe that's the flavor they remember. Parker nodded. Or maybe it's because the baker found her joy again. Evelyn laughed softly. Maybe joy has its own recipe. Near noon, Claire and her husband Ethan entered with a small bouquet of lavender. "Mom, this is for you," Claire said. "You're the bravest woman I know." Evelyn felt emotion rise in her chest as she embraced her daughter. "Bravery," she said, "is what's left when you've cried all your tears," Ethan added. "I'll help promote your bakery online. Everyone should know about these cookies." Evelyn smiled. "As long as they're made with soul, that's enough." Their laughter mingled with the hum of the oven light and warm as the morning breeze. In the afternoon, Rosa appeared with a look of concern and admiration. "Thomas sold his apartment," she said. "His company's collapsing." Evelyn's face remained calm. "Maybe he's finally learning the cost of deceit." Rosa nodded slowly. "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself." Evelyn replied, "I know. I lost everything once too, and that's how I started living again." By late afternoon, clouds gathered above the coast. Evelyn decided to close early and walk to the beach. The wind was cool, the waves soft and rhythmic whispering along the sand. In her hand was a letter from Thomas that had arrived that morning. The ink was smudged, the handwriting unsteady. "I'm sorry," it read. "I've lost everything, but I finally see how strong you are." Evelyn folded the paper gently. A sudden gust caught another old letter from her pocket and carried it out to sea. She watched it drift away, letting the tide erase what was left of the past. When she returned to the bakery, a figure stood waiting by the door. Alana. Her coat was dark and damp, her hair tangled her face, pale and drawn. "I came to apologize," she said softly. "I never wanted him to hurt you." Evelyn met her eyes, her voice calm. "You only took what I no longer wanted to keep." Alana lowered her head. "I've lost everything. He wasn't who I thought he was." Evelyn gave a faint, tired smile. "No one tells the truth while living a lie." Alana's eyes filled with tears. "Do you hate me?" Evelyn shook her head. "No. Because of you, I learned how strong I am." Alana whispered, "You deserve happiness." Then she turned and walked into the mist. Evelyn stood still, watching her disappear. There was no anger left, no bitterness, only peace, the quiet kind that comes from letting go. That evening, Rosa joined Evelyn for dinner. They sat near the fireplace, its glow flickering across the walls. "He wrote to you?" Rosa asked. Evelyn nodded. "Yes." The past ended in just a few words. Rosa raised her glass. "Then here's to the present." Evelyn smiled, and to freedom. Rain began to fall softly against the roof, the rhythm comforting. Evelyn told Rosa about a new recipe, orange and ginger cookies. Rosa grinned. "Bake with joy, not with memory." Evelyn nodded. "That's what I'm learning." Later that night, she opened her window. The wind carried the scent of rain, salt, and earth. Out at sea, the lighthouse beam swept slowly across the water, steady as the heartbeat of the city. Evelyn looked toward the light, realizing she too was shining in her own way, not bright, but steady, strong and warm enough to keep herself safe. Across town, Thomas sat in his empty apartment, a glass beside him. The radio played faintly, a voice saying, "Sea Breeze Bakery," the place where pastries tell a story of resilience and faith. Thomas gave a weary smile. For the first time, he heard Evelyn's name without anger, only regret. When dawn came, Evelyn woke early. She lit a small candle, opened the bakery doors, and breathed in the scent of flour and sea air. She felt light, free, and whole. With a soft smile, she whispered to herself, "I didn't take revenge. I just came back to life." A week after the trial, autumn settled over Savannah, the sunlight as soft as honey. Evelyn's Sea Breeze Bakery was busier than ever. The scent of lemon butter and vanilla mingled with the ocean breeze, drawing passers-by to stop and breathe it in. From early morning, customers lined up outside, most of them locals who wanted to meet the woman the newspapers now called a symbol of resilience. Evelyn didn't care for the title, but she always smiled and thanked those who wished her happiness. In the kitchen, Claire helped her mother knead dough. "I still don't understand how you can forgive everything she said quietly." Evelyn replied gently, "Forgiveness isn't to bring peace to others. It's to free your own heart." Claire looked at her mother with admiration. "I hope when I'm your age I'll be that strong." Evelyn smiled. "Strength lives in every woman. It just reveals itself when life tests her." By noon, Rosa arrived carrying flowers. "I just read the news. Thomas has officially declared bankruptcy. The court gave him 3 years to repay his debts." Evelyn didn't look pleased or angry. "Maybe that's the only path that will help him start over," she said. Rosa sighed. "You're not like me. If I were you, I'd be throwing a party." Evelyn smiled faintly. The greatest victory is peace, not watching someone else fall. Later in the afternoon, Evelyn closed the shop for a short walk along the coast. The wind tossed her hair, bringing the taste of salt on her lips. Children ran along the sand, chasing the waves, their laughter echoing in the distance. She stopped remembering when her own children were that small. Back then, Thomas would hold her hand, and their house had been full of laughter. Now it was only a memory, but it no longer hurt. The past had turned into a lesson. Her steps led her to the harbor where an old wooden bench rested under the shade of an oak tree. Parker sat there reading a newspaper. "Hiding from your customers again, famous baker," he teased. Evelyn chuckled, just taking a moment to breathe. Parker folded the paper and looked at her. "People say you're offering free baking classes for orphans. Is that true?" Evelyn nodded. "They need faith just like I did when everything fell apart." Parker smiled kindly. "You're giving back the best part of yourself." The sky deepened into bronze. Evelyn returned to the bakery and turned on the golden lights. A group of college students was taking photos, asking her for advice. "Remember this," she said. "You don't need a perfect life, only a reason to stand up again." They laughed and wrote her words down. When night came, Rosa returned with 2 small cakes. "I made these to thank you," she said. "If it weren't for you, I'd never have had the courage to leave my bad marriage." Evelyn smiled warmly. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that everyone deserves happiness." They sat by the window listening to the distant waves and the gentle ticking of the oven. Near midnight, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message. "Thank you for letting me face my mistakes. I'm leaving Savannah. I wish you peace." No name was written, but she knew it was Thomas. She read it once and didn't reply. For the first time, his words didn't weigh her down. He had lost much, but not everything. At least he'd found a trace of self-respect. Setting the phone aside, Evelyn looked around the shop. Everything was simple and tidy. Jars of sugar, bowls of flower-white curtains, fluttering softly. This was her world now, not grand, but whole. She lit a scented candle, the warm glow reflecting on the photo hanging above the counter, showing her with Claire and Rosa, all smiling. The next morning, the sun rose early. Parker arrived with baskets of lemons. "The whole neighborhood smells like your cookies," he said, laughing. "Everyone's asking for the recipe." Evelyn smiled. "The secret is patience and faith." Parker nodded. 2 things rarer than gold. Throughout the morning, customers came and went nonstop. An elderly woman with silver hair said to Evelyn, "You make me believe it's never too late to start again." Evelyn bowed slightly in thanks. When the woman left, Evelyn stood for a moment watching her go, a quiet pride swelling inside her. She wasn't just baking pastries, she was baking back her faith in herself and in all who had once been broken. as the sun dipped low, painting the sea in amber light. Evelyn stepped out to the porch and closed her eyes, listening to the waves. In the whisper of the breeze, she thought she heard a voice say, "Freedom is the reward for those who dare to let go." Evelyn smiled. At last she understood happiness had never left. It had always been here in the breath she took, in the scent of her baking, and in the heart that had learned how to heal itself. Morning in Savannah glowed bright and golden sunlight spilling across the glass windows of Sea Breeze Bakery like liquid gold. Evelyn opened her shop earlier than usual. The scent of flour, butter, and lemon mingled with the ocean breeze, filling the air with warmth and sweetness. She tied on her apron, turned on the oven, and began preparing her first large order, 2 wedding cakes for a young couple from town. "Once I believed in forever, too," she murmured, smiling at the memory of her youth, though the thought no longer hurt. When Claire entered, the sunlight fell across her face. "I spoke to Dad," she said softly. "He's leaving Savannah, planning to move to Charlotte with an old friend." Evelyn simply nodded. "That's the right choice. Don't stay angry with him, darling. Anger only keeps people living inside your heart." Claire looked at her mother, her voice trembling. "You really forgive him," Evelyn replied gently. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer letting the past control the present." Around noon, Parker arrived with a fresh crate of lemons. "Heard you're baking wedding cakes today," he said cheerfully. "They're for someone else, but that scent of freedom belongs to you." Evelyn laughed. "Freedom does have a flavor, you know, a hint of salt from the sea, sweetness from sugar, and a little bitterness from memory." Parker's eyes softened. "I think you found yourself again." By afternoon, the shop was bustling. A group of college students came to film a short piece about the most inspiring woman in Savannah. One girl asked, "If you could send a message to those who've been hurt, what would you say?" Evelyn smiled gently. "Don't let your wounds make you bitter. Let them make you strong." Her words spread online, gathering hundreds of followers for the bakery. But Evelyn didn't care about fame. She was simply happy that her story might help someone else rise again. Later that evening, Rosa stopped by, holding a contract. "A seaside restaurant wants to order your cakes weekly." "Do you agree?" Evelyn looked it over, then smiled. "I'll say yes, but only if they print my bakery's name on their menu." Rosa laughed. "You're finally learning to bargain." Evelyn shook her head. "Not bargaining, just knowing my worth." They clinked their glasses of wine, the candlelight shimmering on the wooden table, warm and serene. After Rosa left, the bakery was quiet. Evelyn cleaned the counters, polished the front window, and caught her reflection in the glass, her silver hair glinting in the light. She paused, whispering, "I'm not the woman I used to be." Outside, the wind carried the smell of salt and the faint fragrance of lemons from Parker's basket. Night fell, and Evelyn sat on the porch, watching the lighthouse beams sweep slowly across the dark water. She thought back to the first day she opened the bakery, the fear, the doubt, and how each one had slowly turned into courage. Everything she had now wasn't luck. It was the result of learning to endure pain and stand again. In the city, Thomas packed his belongings. The apartment was nearly empty, only a few boxes left. He looked at an old family photo, touched the glass, and placed it in his suitcase. The autumn wind slipped through the window, scattering a newspaper clipping across the floor. On it was Evelyn's quote from the local press, "Don't let your wounds make you bitter." Thomas picked it up, reading it again. Tears welled in his eyes, salty like the sea. For the first time, his heart felt at peace because he knew she had truly forgiven him. The next morning, Evelyn was invited to speak at the local food festival. On the small stage before the townspeople of Savannah, she said, "I once believed happiness came from being loved. Now I know it comes from loving yourself and having the courage to live honestly. Every crack in the heart is a place where light can enter." The crowd erupted in applause, rolling like waves against the shore. That night, the bakery was quiet again. Evelyn lit a candle and opened her journal. "I've walked through pain," she wrote, "but it no longer defines me. Life isn't perfect, but I've learned to treasure every imperfect piece of it." She closed the book, listening to the ocean's rhythm, the wind whispering like a lullaby. On the table, the finished wedding cake glistened with soft icing, its sweet aroma filling the room. Evelyn placed a small card beside it. "May your love be strong enough to weather every storm." She smiled and blew out the candle. The long day came to a peaceful close, but inside her joy rose quietly, like the tide, steady, full, and warm. Morning in Savannah was soft and golden, the kind of light that seemed to gently wrap the city in warmth. The waves rolled lazily toward the shore, their rhythm blending with the sweet aroma of pastries drifting from Seabreeze Bakery along the quiet coastal street. Evelyn unlocked the bakery door, her white apron neatly tied silver hair catching the sun. Today marked exactly 1 year since she walked away from her marriage, a year of loss, of rebuilding, and of peace rediscovered. The shop was alive with the hum of the oven and the mingled scent of butter, flour, and lemon carried on the ocean breeze. As she worked the dough, she whispered, "1 year of freedom. 1 year of finding myself," and smiled. Customers began arriving early. Claire and her husband Ethan entered carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cotton, her first grandchild. Evelyn's eyes filled with tenderness. "He looks just like you did when you were a baby," she said. Claire laughed, tears glimmering. "He's our new beginning." Evelyn held the child, breathing in the soft scent of milk. "Maybe destiny knows how to return what life takes away," she whispered. Moments later, Rosa walked in, holding a bright bouquet of sunflowers. "Happy first anniversary of freedom," she said. Evelyn's smile glowed. "Freedom and sweetness like the cake we'll bake today." The bakery soon filled with laughter. Parker arrived with his usual basket of lemons, brought the best ones, he said. "A special day deserves special fruit." Evelyn nodded. "They give my cakes their soul." Parker smiled warmly. "No Evelyn that comes from you." His words made her laugh, the kind of laughter that came from peace, not pretense. By midday, the bakery was bustling. Locals and tourists filled the small tables, drawn not only by the pastries, but by the story of the woman who turned heartbreak into hope. A group of students came in, filming a short feature. One asked Mrs. Grant, "If you could send a message to people who've been hurt, what would it be?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "Don't let pain turn you bitter. Let it make you stronger. I didn't rise above it. I walked through it. Storms don't last forever, and when they end, you'll still be standing." The room fell silent for a moment. Then applause erupted. Evelyn smiled modestly, her eyes calm. That afternoon, the light turned amber. Evelyn closed early and walked along the shore with Rosa and Claire. The air smelled of salt, the waves whispering softly at their feet. Rosa said, "I've never seen you so at peace." Evelyn smiled. "That's because I stopped fighting the past. Now I just bake love my family and live truthfully." Claire looped her arm through her mother's. "You've taught me that strength isn't about never crying, but about still believing in good." Evelyn nodded. "Yes, my dear, life will always taste of salt, but we can choose to add the sugar." From a distance, a man watched. Thomas had returned quietly to Savannah, not to interfere, but to see her once more. No one knew he was there. He saw Evelyn laughing with her family, the sea breeze lifting her hair, her face radiant with serenity. For the first time, he understood what peace looked like. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were only a few lines. Thank you for showing me what freedom truly means." He placed it on the sand and turned away as the wind carried it toward the waves. That evening, Sea Breeze Bakery glowed like a beacon. Evelyn hung a new sign above the door. 1 year. 1 beginning. She looked at it, pride warming her heart. Rosa raised her glass of wine. Parker lifted his coffee and Claire smiled, holding her baby. They toasted together. Evelyn spoke softly. To the past for teaching us strength, to the present for reminding us to be grateful, and to the future for giving us courage to dream again. The clinking of their glasses rang like music. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept across the dark water, brushing Evelyn's face with light. She closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of sugar and salt. She was home, not as the woman who once suffered, but as the woman who rebuilt her life with her own hands. Before closing, she took a piece of chalk and wrote on the small board by the counter, "Life is like baking. You must go through the heat before you become sweet." Underneath, she signed her name, Evelyn Grant. When the last customer left, she dimmed the lights, leaving only a candle glowing on the counter. Outside, waves murmured against the sand, the wind singing softly like a lullaby. Evelyn sat quietly, her heart still, her soul light. A full year had passed, and she finally understood the most beautiful part of life wasn't revenge or victory. It was the courage to begin again, strong, gentle, and free. Across the street, the bakery's window reflected the golden candlelight, flickering like a star against the night. Out at sea, the lighthouse turned its beam once more, guiding travelers home. Evelyn smiled faintly, knowing she had already found hers. Then, as the camera slowly pulled away, Granny's voice echoed through the gentle night air. "Sometimes, to find the light, you must step beyond the familiar walls." Would you dare to do what Evelyn did? Share your thoughts below, press, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're listening from. Thank you for being part of Granny's Voice, where every wound becomes a source of strength and every ending leads to a new beginning.